Thanks for the community effort to get me going here today. Some of you may know me, some of you I've seen in my classes and stuff, and you've decided for more pain. Yeah. But that's okay. I'm Clark Greene, and I just retired from Buffalo State College. Been around the business for about 40 years, and some of the things I'm going to say today are personal perspective. Some of them are a little bit of opinion, some of them are based in fact, and some of you may leave here disturbed, some of you may leave here upset at me, but I think this is a conversation that kind of needs to be had. To start with, at age 23, I was the baby in the room when a lot of the technology education initiatives really started, and I emerged from a gopher person transporting people from around the world, literally coming into New York State to present their ideas of technology education. And as I ferried them between Oswego and Syracuse, I sat in between and started listening to what was being said. And the next thing, I've never been shy to talk, and I found myself immersed in this new venture that we call technology education. And I'm starting out with a bit of a humorous thing. That's what I looked like when this whole thing started. So. Yeah, this was a shot as a New York State delegation traveled to the IT, what was still the AIAA, the American Industrial Arts Association conference in San Diego, and I was part of the team that presented there. So yeah, that's for those of you who are young, contrast this and you'll see what you look like in 40 years. Okay, and this was a team of writers for some of the high school programs that were involved back then. The person here is Dr. Jack Bruckman, deceased. This person, some of you may know as a former professor from Oswego, Bill Waite, and the person actually taking the picture in the mirror is Bob Jones from Western New York. So we were hot and heavy into it. All right, so I'm going to start out with a statement, and one of my frustrations over the years is what I perceive to be an unawareness or not understanding or just not accepting of the intended objectives of technology and engineering education as it's been contained in our history. I'm going to start out here today going into some history, and I'm not a history buff, but a lot of people don't know a lot of this stuff, and so I've listed some things going all the way back to 1887, and I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but the next few slides I'm going to share what some of these things were saying that really describe what we are about today, and yet the practice doesn't meet the philosophy. And I'm going to start out with Calvin Woodward, and it's a fairly long thing, but I think it's important to recognize what he was saying way back then. And he said, the objective of the introduction of manual training, which was a term that preceded industrial arts, okay, was not to make mechanics. And that's one of my frustrations today when I hear, and this is my opinion, when I hear CTE, I want to just tear what little hair off the sides of my head that I have. That, making people, training people for careers is not and never has been what we were about. And way back in 1887, he said this. It's not to make mechanics, okay? In schools, we teach banking or business not because we expect kids to become bankers. We teach drawing not because we expect everybody to become architects or artisans. We teach the use of tools, properties of materials, and methods of the arts, not because we expect students to become artisans. We teach them the Constitution and the acts of Congress, not because we think they're all going to be congressional people or senators. But we do expect our students will at least have something to do with bankers and architects and artists and engineers and artisans, and we expect them to become good citizens. The great objective of what we do is educational. Other objectives are secondary. That industrial results, i.e. skills, okay, will surely follow. This person does not have the least doubt about that. That will take care of themselves. So this is way back in a previous century, okay? Saying that we're not CTE, we're not vocational education. We do a lot of things included in that, but that's not our objective. And yours truly rewrote this for the 21st century in one of my philosophical deliberations. And I said the major objective of technology and engineering education is not to produce technical workers. It's been said many times, and there appears to be a continual need of repeating the statement. And then I go along and quote what was said before. And we teach CAD, technical drawing, and engineering design, not because we expect to train architects or artists or engineers. We teach the use of tools, the properties of materials, and so on and so forth, and broad technical process, not because we expect students to become technicians, skilled in trades, or masters of electronic gadgetry. But we do expect our students will have something to do with decision-making and interactions involving technological processes, innovation, implementations, and impacts. Technology and engineering education teaches robotics, biotechnology, automation, construction, and much more, because the embedded principles and concepts, those are two key words that we're going to be talking about a little bit down the road here, of the 21st century in everyday life and work. The great objective of the technology and engineering education is primarily educational. Other objectives are secondary, that occupational results will surely follow. And last night, when I saw the awards being done, and I'm watching some of the presentations, and especially the folks from Endicott, and I'm just picking them, and the student who did the simulator. I thought of all of the concepts involved in that, from construction techniques, from electronics, from communication systems, and so on. And anybody involved in that project was taking away so much rich stuff that could be applied across a whole landscape of technological occupations and even avocations, pastime kinds of things. And really, that's what we need to focus on. That's not the paradigm, unfortunately, that we exist under. Moving up in history a little bit, back into the early 1900s, a lot of people don't think this, but our roots in the 20th century are elementary. Bonser and Mossman were the first people to really talk about industrial arts, and it was for the elementary schools. And they began to systematize the study of industrial arts in the elementary school, although they did not use the term general education. They repeatedly, in their book, referred to industrial arts as being an essential part of every child's schooling. If all citizens must know how to read, write, and use the general process of number, they reason, is there not also a body of knowledge relative to the industrial arts which is of common value to all? And I ask that same question. We're in a political climate where everybody has to have a piece of the pie. And to be frank with you, when I take a look at all the way from our government on down, advocating for CTE, and you look at the substance that is behind that, my opinion, and I know I'm on videotape here, but my opinion is, when I look at CTE, I see a 50-year-old model of vocational education, okay, where people want to train people for specific, jobs and occupations and so on. That's an inefficient way to deal with the diversity of the technological world we live in. There's no way that we'll ever be able to have all of the relevant disciplines and industries and jobs and categories and careers using that model. But in a model like this, where we have conceptually based understanding of a broad range of technology, okay, that really serves us better. And that's the body of knowledge relative to technology and engineering education, which should be in schools a common value of all. But we're in a political climate competing with other folks who see that we use hammers just like they do in the BOCES construction course, and they equate us, and it's not the same. If anybody wants to jump in and tell me I'm nuts, just raise your hand and I'll let you do that. Okay, 1947, William Warner, a curriculum to reflect technology. Way back then, we had people in the industrial arts saying, look, what we're really talking about is technology here. And Warner was one of those people. He was the one in 1947, and I was talking with Yusik earlier, this would become part of some later things, but 47, communication, construction, power, transportation, manufacturing. Come on, folks, this stuff is approaching 100 years old, all right? And does that really represent technology education? And yet, people look at this as being the cutting edge categories. And here's where it first occurred. And the rank and file don't realize this, okay, how old these categories are. In 1948, Walter Williams Jr., okay, really grasped this notion, and he said, for a time, the true educational concept of industrial arts was lost. I would say it's been lost again in technology education. And his position was relegated to a secondary place in the scheme of all education. Now, under the pressure of a complex technological society, again, technological society, 1948, okay? The narrow view of manual arts concept is giving way to a more comprehensive and flexible interpretation of industrial arts or technology. The crucial need exists for technological literacy is apparent. Technological literacy, 1948. Right? And we still have people that serve on regulatory boards controlling education that think technological literacy is something that was just invented yesterday. And what defines that? We'll talk a little bit more now.
Just to throw a little wrench into it, and this is maybe my own hang-up, is that we used the term industrial arts for a lot of years, and it was never industrial arts, it was still manual arts.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah. The practice hasn't matched the terminology, yes. and so on.
Well, we're industrial arts teachers. What do we teach them? Basic manual skills. We weren't, very little. The most you'd ever see is maybe one manufacturing project in the class,
right.
But they never followed the philosophy on it.
I agree. Only both schools take care of the manual industrial art.
Right. Right. And I'm going to make a comment a little bit later on that as well. But interestingly enough, in two different presentations today, I just sat in my friend Busik's presentation, and this was a project, the IACP, okay, the Industrial Arts Curriculum Project, that was intended for middle school, 7th and 8th. That was designed specifically for that, and it was a huge influence. And take a look at, they selected 2 of those 5 terms that were up on the previous screen and said, look, what we need in all middle schools throughout the whole country are these 2 courses, and the IACP was a writing of those 2 courses, and it was the world of manufacturing and the world of construction.
Just a clarification that when this was designed, it was for junior high school, because middle school didn't.
Well, yes, okay, I'm mixing my terms.
Middle school
right.
didn't exist.
Didn't exist, but we're talking 7th and 8th grade, right?
It was specifically 7th and 8th grade.
Yep. Thank you for that, Henry. But anyway, so you have this notion of some of these preceding things that I have thrown up here to say what our purpose is. And then these 2 titles really take us directly into vocational training. Our predecessors or entry kind of levels of experiences. And you know, we go 50 years prior to this, and we have mention of the technological world that we live in, technological literacy, and yet here we have people within our discipline, and this was a huge project nationally, and everybody jumped on this bandwagon. So I see us kind of like bouncing back and forth over the decades. That creates some confusion. We're still suffering from that. Then we come up to something a lot of people don't know about, but I'm going to share with this. This was the Jackson's Mill, and it was called Industrial Arts Curriculum Theory. This was a collection of leaders in technology education or industrial arts at the time from around the country who assembled in West Virginia near, where is West Virginia University? Morgantown. This is slightly outside of Morgantown. It's a retreat kind of place where 50, 75 people who were leaders in their profession assembled and said, okay, we need to kind of reconfigure, you know, what our purpose is and so on. And even though the title of this says Industrial Arts Curriculum Theory, this was really an initial attempt in the modern era, I call it, of technological education and technological literacy. You'll see the term technology throughout this. And as Yusik mentioned before, these folks went, and you'll see, if you want to look through this, back in here there is a chart with those categories that we looked at before. Not just manufacturing and construction, but including transportation, power and energy, all that kind of stuff. So this was an attempt, while not explicitly stated, to kind of not be so focused on just manufacturing and construction like the IACP, but to broaden this out. And again, these were 50, 75 of the you know, best minds we had at the time that assembled for this retreat. Quite a, I don't know how many days, but it was significant. And came up with this. And this, in the late 70s, early 80s, was the new guidebook. Okay. Now I'm going to jump back. I don't have a slide for this, but just to show you. I have all of these things that I'm showing. I actually have. I have these in my collection at home. But here was a book by a guy named Delmar Olson, who was leader at the time, and he wrote a book called Industrial Arts and Technology. And within this book, and you can see I have all kinds of bookmarks saying this is important and so on that I've quoted over the years, but talks a lot about the study of technology and how industrial arts should be evolving into technology education. Okay, so this was another one. I don't have a slide for this, but I wanted to show you the artifact actually exists. All right. So Jackson's Mill, like I said, communication, transportation, construction, manufacturing. They went beyond the two, and they attempted to say, you know, these are the organizers. All right. So one of the problems that I see as I come to conferences like this, and I just came back from the ITEA conference, and I'm walking around and I'm listening to conversations, sidebar conversations, dinner conversations, and so on. And what I came away after 4 days at a national conference was, we don't have any unity about what our mission and goals are for this discipline. It just doesn't exist. I'm there talking with people that I never met before, and they're telling, oh, this is a STEM conference. They had no clue that this conference was the ITEA, International Technology and Engineering Education. Yeah, we have adopted that moniker because we fit well into it. But they had no clue that this was a discipline that was heavily embedded into STEM education. They were at a STEM conference, beginning and end. And then we had other folks who were talking about nothing. You know what, let's throw all this crap out. All we need is wood shops. You know? So I'm listening to these comments, from attendees at a national conference. And of course, there was whole, ranges of comments in between. But I see that as a problem, okay? Are we vocational or general education, or STEM, or CTE? We've never settled that. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why we don't settle that, okay? I'm not here to propose any solutions if I'm a liberal Democrat, but I think on this one, the autocratic thing, I'd like to be able to just like snap my whip and say what should be. But this is an issue, all right? And I just want to bring that to the fore. Obstacle number 2 is kind of similar to number 1, but how can we get consensus regarding our relationship with our real past and our perceived past? Okay? Industrial arts of the shop. If you delve into this book or some of the other references that I had up there before, and you look at the substance of what was being said, all right? I went to a small rural high school, and I went into this profession, this area of teaching, because my entire experience was wood shop. And I love the smell of wood. I love to put a tool against something being turned on a lathe. To me, that was the whole world. Okay? And for a large portion of our population, that's what we are. We're strictly a skills-based, tool-applying entity. And that was never, even as you can see, going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, that wasn't the objective. But that's what it became. And in many aspects still is today. So I see that as obstacle number 2. So here's a question for us, okay? How is something new if it shares the same terminology and content as the thing that preceded it? Now, a little anecdotal story. Back in the days when you saw me when my hair was not as plentiful on the face and it was dark, and I was going around and presenting new ideas to industrial arts teachers that were going to suddenly become technology education teachers. There was an initiative back in the day, it was called the TTT in New York State, the Technology Teacher Training Project. So imagine you're in a school district out in the middle of nowhere, and some young guy shows up with a couple of other people and said, "Hey, you're not teaching shop anymore, industrial arts is dead. I'm here to present technology education and so on." And as I began to share examples, there was some crossover. Some of the things we were doing, okay, could be rationalized to be a part of technology education. And as the naysayers would listen, after a while, they were saying, "Well, I'm kind of doing that now." And so that was a nice thing to see, but so many times that rationalization, by the time they got back home, was a license to keep doing everything they had been doing just the way they had been doing it. And in many ways, that's what I have observed over the years, okay? But the question is, if we keep doing that, the 4 terms that we had up there at Jackson's Mill that was done in the late 70s, okay, we still see those 4 categories, manufacturing, transportation, construction systems, as the cutting edge. And my opinion, and I told you at the beginning of this, it shouldn't be. Those shouldn't be the terms that we're using. I don't know what terms should be used. I have some opinions on that I won't share because it gets me in trouble. But anyways, the question here is, if we keep doing, you know, the same thing that's preceded it with a new wrapping paper on it, you know, how is that a challenge, and do we need to overlook it? Okay, so this quote from David Pulias, who was a state supervisor and professor in Florida back in 1989. Now, 1989 was when we were literally in the middle of adopting technology education as the new moniker for our profession. And he wrote an article, and in it, he asked these 3 questions. And he identified 3 viewpoints that we can take with respect to implementing technology education. Number 1, is it revolutionary? Are we going to discard everything that came before and come up with something new and begin afresh? Number 2 was, or are we evolutionary? Are we going to keep part of the old stuff, install part of the new, and ease into a new full implementation? And number 3, unfortunately, I see a lot of, personally, this is my perspective, are we going to disguise what we've been doing for years and make it look like something new? Now, I'm going to stop for a minute because a lot of times I take heat from folks saying, you know what, I think you're full of crap. I teach woodshop, and my district loves woodshop. My principal loves woodshop. You know, my superintendent loves woodshop. The parents in the community love woodshop. It's a great thing. My students are motivated. They wouldn't even come to school if it wasn't for woodshop. I am not disagreeing with that. Not disagreeing with that at all. My point would be, to counter that would be, well, some of the things you do in woodshop do have value and are valuable. But going to that, back to that notion of technological literacy, how much does that woodshop only experience contribute to the more global perception of the world we live in? And should we be using a different term? The term material processing not only includes how we work and make things with wood, but how we work and make things with metal, how we work and make things with plastics, how we work and make things with ceramics, how we work and make things with whatever. And why can't you have a course, an experience for students that would not throw out all of those good things you would do in a wood shop or a woodworking class, but to have students walk out of there understanding the world of materials. Okay? I'm going to divert a minute if I can find. Oh yeah. Who knows what this is? I know it's hard to see from. Anybody want to just guess what this is? Yeah, I'll pass it around. You can take a look at it. It's a little electronic circuit board, obviously, but can somebody tell me?
I already know what it is. Light?
Yeah, that's the inside of a 21st century light bulb. Okay? Most of us have in our minds a vision of Edison's light bulb, which is what? A little filament in a vacuumed glass globe, okay, that burns brightly, made of tungsten, and illuminates the room. That is a cold light bulb that will never get hot. It is bright. It is circulated with a bunch of little LEDs. All right? I myself didn't realize, I knew about LED light bulbs, but I myself didn't even realize that the bulbs weren't glass at all. They were pieces of plastic. Okay? And I tipped a lamp over in my house, and the bulb hit the floor hard, and it didn't break. And, you know, 60 years of using incandescent light bulbs, I thought, what the hell did they make that thing out of? So I took this down in my basement, and I put it on the bandsaw. I said, I want to see what's in this special kind of light bulb.
Didn't it work after you dropped it?
Yes,
I thought so.
yes, it did.
Put some tungsten filament.
Yeah, you don't even, yeah.
Filament to break.
So anyway, why did I just bring this up in the context of the materials class? Okay? Those LEDs are not like the LEDs of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. If you remember back, you could get LEDs essentially in how many colors?
Red, white, and green.
Yeah, like there were 2 or 3 colors, okay? And they weren't very bright, were they? Does anybody know what happened that now has us be able to use LEDs that are used to, you know, everything's like, what happened? Anybody? A nanomaterial was invented to enable the production of a different type of LED that is adjustable, that has different, more intense illumination and so on and so forth. That was a material conversion and actual evolution of new material. I talked with a graduate student at the University of Buffalo whose doctoral dissertation was on the engineering of new nanomaterials. He worked on another NSF project to develop a half a dozen new activities for kids in schools to learn about and experience nanomaterials. Why aren't we doing that? That's part of technological literacy. That's just an aside, but I just wanted to share that. Here's another question that I have. I once was hired at a district and told that all students in my middle school classes shall get A's. Okay? Because all we did is do stuff with our hands, and that doesn't, that's not what this school is about. All right? So there's a whole history of educational psychology, educational philosophy, and says that we learn best, and I'm going to reference back to Usik's presentation today of Pappard. Hand skills, still doing things, plus conceptual understanding and cognitive skills derived from that conceptual understanding is what we're about. But when you talk to people in educational administration and educational direction and philosophy and so on, specifically at the regulatory level, they don't see this continuum. I'm sorry. I talked to members, individual members of the Board of Regents. I've had debates with past commissioners of education, and they just don't get it. We're either here to do manual skills only, or you're here to do abstract learning of math and science and English and so on without really any real practical applications. And where the hell is the relationship?
Hey, Clark?
Yeah.
When I was in middle school in the 60s, that was in the Williamsville Central School District, which has always traditionally been pretty cutting edge. And the industrial arts classes were not really considered shop classes because they did all of those things, and that was in the 60s. So somebody was understanding what was going on with the literature beforehand going back, as opposed to just manual training, where you give a kid a block of wood, he locks it in a vise, and he just makes chips all class,
And that goes back to some of my slides earlier, that we never have universally adopted. We have so many divergent practices going on in different classrooms, and total disagreements among, people in our midst. And I'm thanking all of you for being so polite to me.
Clark, another one that gets to me, and it's been a hang-up of mine for years, and I think is that when you talk to people and you give them, when you look at their designing lessons or whatever, and you say, are you standards-based or standards-aligned? And people don't understand, and what they do is they say, oh, I'm doing this, and then they look at the list and check, and they say, oh, we're aligned to all of this stuff.
Right.
We don't, instead of looking of what the standard is and what you're supposed to be teaching, we're gonna do what we've always been doing and just check off the boxes.
It's a kind of superfluous activity, okay? So I come to this challenge number 3. Really a lack of a universally adopted basic structure and pedagogical identity. If you go across the country, I can take you to a Midwest state that said, we don't have any technology education, we have industrial technology. And I can take you to another state that says, we don't have industrial technology or technology education, we have CTE. We don't have any subcomponents to that, that's our identity, okay? And you have programs that ascribe to whatever that terminology or that philosophy is. So, from a national level, what the hell are we? You know, we claim technological literacy and technology education, but we have this challenge. We don't have a university adopted or accepted basic structure and pedagogical identity. It's a problem. So I'm going to try to simplify this, all right? That I see 2 real drivers of what we do. And that is conceptual understanding. I'm going to, and you know, I mentioned one activity earlier. I'm going to share something. When I was teaching the public schools, I did it quite differently than I was doing at the college level, and that I felt at the college level I needed to give the teachers the technical abilities to do things that they would need to teach some of the stuff in the elementary schools and public schools. But how many people in here have lamented that students can't use a ruler, can't measure? Okay, it really sucks. Okay, and people say, I've developed worksheets, I've done all this other kind of stuff. I wrestled with that when I taught middle school. So I went to this and I thought, how can I do this? First thing I said to myself, well, the concept of measurement. Have we ever really thought about what the concept of measurement is? And I was just wrestling with this, and I had a brainstorm one night, and I said, well, how many things do we measure? I came up with 15 different things that we can measure.
You did a presentation.
I did a presentation on it years ago, and I still get requests from people who are descendants from people who attended that saying, hey, do you still have those worksheets? I do, I have them on. But what I did is, I said, can we measure eyesight? Can we measure light? Can we measure speed? Can we measure specific gravity? Can we measure
Temperature.
temperature? Can we measure volume? Can we measure electrical current, voltage, so on? So I came up with 15 different things that we could measure. And I stood in front of my middle school students and I said, you know what? There is this next activity we're going to do is the technology of measurement. And I came up with 15 succinct, like 1-paragraph descriptions of what the measurement was, why it was important in our lives, and how you conducted that measurement. And then I had like time, measuring time. I had an hourglass, a little like thing that you use in the kitchen, and a mechanical and a digital stopwatch. And I would have students like try to, measure how accurate the hourglass was with the digital stopwatch. How did they compare with it? And it was just a fun activity. But these students like, oh, I want to go to the next, and they actually read the little paragraph, and then, okay, how to use this multimeter, and they were like just engaged. And after that, I came to them and I said, all right, one type of measurement we haven't talked about is linear measurement. The thing that all of us are, I said, so you've seen how measurement is important in our lives. This is important too. So, if I have this Snickers bar, and I don't start out with drawing a fraction on the board. I said, if I have this Snickers bar, How many Snickers bars do I have? 1. All right, I'm going to take a knife and I'm cut it in half. Okay? How many pieces do we have now? 2. So it's 1 whole Snickers bar that's been divided into 2 equal pieces. That's 1/2. Can you visualize this? Do you need some kind of special sight to be able to look that now I have these 2 equal pieces, each one being 1/2 of the original? So let's cut those 2 1/2. How many pieces do I have now? 4. All right? So I'm laying them out there. Can you count? Can you visualize that there are 4 equal pieces? Yeah. Okay? So if I take one of them, that's 1/4. All right, here's a ruler. And here's 1 whole inch. Okay? And I need to visualize what the marking is, equal distance between those 2 ends of an inch. So that's 1 divided by 2. So what's that mark that I've just visualized? 1/2. So then I do the same thing. Okay, you need to be able to visualize, all right? So I'm going to somehow look for the mark that divides us into 4 equal pieces. That mark is 1/4, just like the Snickers bar. I did that, and the performance, the concept was registered with those kids. And it started out with that thing. Why that isn't a staple? I mean, that was just something I came up with, and it was, you know, and it worked. Okay? So conceptual based, and then design based. All you have to look at for is all the stuff that's been coming out, and having students engaged in the creative process of designing things. Makes them, you know, whether it's a CO2 car, some of the more traditional things, or some of the more off the beat path kind of things. Going back to that simulator, there was a hell of a lot of design that went into that activity. Okay? So these are really, I think, the 2 drivers of technological literacy. Okay? So what's a concept? If you just ask people that question, everybody's like, I've heard the term before, I kind of got an idea, but anyway. So I just did a little research. Okay? Concept, an idea that enables us to make sense of the real world. Concept, an abstract idea generalized from specifics. That's the Jackson-Smith. Concept, a broad idea or a guiding general principle, such as one that determines how a person or culture behaves, how nature, reality, or events are perceived. Okay? Concept, the most basic understanding of something. So that is, all of those things are really in line with technological literacy, us understanding the technological world because of the concepts that define it. And some people say, well, you know what, we're not just about using AutoCAD or whatever the latest flavor of design software is to design something. It doesn't go far enough. Well, I like this thing from Wikipedia where they say design as a noun, and design can be a verb as well, informally refers to a plan for the construction of an object or a system. So when we talk about design, we're not just talking about the ideation part. We're actually talking about part of the design process is actually creating the artifact or putting the idea, implementing the idea, or putting it into action. And that's why I use this term to kind of push people to the side and push back a little bit, saying design is not just the drawing part. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. These are the national standards for technology and engineering literacy. And initially, when you look at this, it's kind of confusing. But I want to point to the fact, if you take a look at the context, okay, these are terms different from manufacturing, construction, woodworking, metalworking, whatever. And they suggest other kinds of things. Notice that transportation just isn't transportation, it's transportation and logistics. That's a concept that actually often goes with that. Energy and power, okay, are concepts in and of themselves. information and communication. Okay. 1989, I bought a pulsing laser and a receptor, and I brought it into my classroom. How many people know how fiber optics works? How many students have you said, if you ask them, how many of you know what fiber optics is? Oh, we have Verizon at my house, I get my cable TV through fiber. How does that happen? Okay, well, we take pulsing laser light and we transport that through a very precisely designed narrow tube. And those pulses create digital information that is basically then transformed into the sound and video that you get on your television. There are companies out there, you can buy a small pulsing laser and a receptor and just set it up as a demonstration in your room, where you set this over here and you hook a little microphone to this pulsing laser. You got a receptor over there hooked up to a speaker. Jimmy, can you hear me over there? And if you have that laser, aligned correctly, it seems like, wait a minute, how did that happen? Well, your voice was converted into digital pulses traveling through the air across the room. What a concept. And yet, how many people have Verizon Fios? Don't have a clue. That's the technological world we live in. So, this was similar to the industrial arts Jackson's Mill. This was a combination of some of the leaders a few years ago, national standards. And not beating up on our state education representative, because she is in no way at fault of this. But I am personally livid over the fact that we're still living by 25 or 30-year-old standards, when our national discipline is, with some of our leaders, came up with this model. This is what, in New York, I think we should be, and I'm politicking right now, I'll admit it, but yeah.
I need to correct one thing. So that's international. So,
Yes, you're right.
So because I translate that into Korean
Okay,
with my team, and then Germany they translate to German.
Right.
And then my friend Japanese, Chinese, they all translate in their language.
I stand corrected and I apologize to you. That is, I mean, there are many countries around the world that are using these standards, not just in the US.
Yeah, Australia also using that.
Right, yeah. So you, Dr. Sun was, actually, you were single-handedly, I think, responsible for translating a lot of this to be used in South Korea, which it is now. Okay. So this, I think, is an important point that hopefully someday we'll be able to get over this. For the future, we need a critical mass of proactive teachers inside and outside the classroom. We need sustained support from government, departments of education, and others to listen to what we say, to look at the most representative practices of our discipline as it's philosophically comprised, and to move forward. I think we're at a tipping point right now. We're either going to acquiesce to an old model or move to something new. Now, I throw this up here as just somewhat related, and I see some people in this room that I've actually heard this from. Okay? When I heard, oh, well, we have a combined program at my school. We've got PLTW and we've got the traditional tech ed. What do you think is really being said then?
Shop and project lead the way.
Right. The old shop version of industrial arts going back to the mid 20th century. and Project Lead.
I mean, that's Clarence Central School District, and they were one of the early adopters of Project Lead the Way, and they still do that terminology there. Tech Ed and Project Lead the Way, and Tech Ed use metal shop, wood shop, and it's for a different group of kids, that instead of them going to BOCES for construction systems, they stay in the school and learn the stuff there.
Right, right.
And it's the same teachers crossing over.
So to me, the individual saying this, I have no animosity against them or you or any of you. But I wish, one of my wishes as I come to the twilight of my, my career, is that people, there should be nothing traditional about technology education. It should be ever evolving as technology evolves and so on. And this is something I wanted to throw up here to say, it drives me nuts. All right. And I would say that because of that, Project Lead the Way, they have a quality program and so on, but how they achieved their status really was out of disrespect for technology education, technology and engineering education as a discipline. And they have been a competing notion that I think has ultimately created that previous slide of, if you're doing tech ed, you're doing the traditional stuff, you want something state-of-the-art, it's us. And I just feel
But you know what, Clark? At the time when you were president of NISDEA and then I was president of NISDEA, we kind of broke down those barriers between the old, as they say, traditional technology education and Project Lead the Way. Because remember, there was a lot of animosity and headbutting going on in those times back in the early 2000s. And we actually, we got people that did Project Lead the Way to start coming to the conferences and being members of NISDEA.
right.
And, the traditional shop folks, they were communicating back and forth, and I think that happened in that time span when we were involved, because there was so much, I'm gonna say it's, old technology mentality, in terms of just how people
Right.
were dealing with it, and they didn't wanna, they wanted to keep those bridges burning, it seemed.
Right.
And that was one of the things that we kind of, with other people in there involved, that was kind of a paradigm shift for, I think, the whole, at least in New York State, I think.
I know we're running over, and I'm just going to end with this, and I encourage you all, if you want to debate with me or whatever, or with each other, or just percolate and think about some of this stuff. But I just want to go back to this, the 63, that was the book, Delmar Orson, that I brought forth. In 66, Paul DeVore wrote a book called Technology, an Intellectual Discipline. You can still get it on Amazon for a couple bucks. The Industrial Arts Curriculum Project that I mentioned before, that happened in 1968. The Jackson's Mill, okay, happened in 79, 80, 81. In this state, the New York State Regents Action Plan and the Futuring Project had us as the first state in the country that formally adopted technology education as a new discipline. And we were the state that jumped off the cliff and did that. And it was through the Regents Action Plan who suggested the total elimination of industrial arts and technology from the school landscape. And it was from the rank and file that referenced some of these previous things that said, you know what, we have almost a century of stuff that says we should be teaching about technology, and when we pushed back, this organization pushed back, we were made as part of the Futuring Project, and that was how technology education was born in New York State. Now, back in the late 90s, the National Standards for Technological Literacy, and then the last graphic that I had, 2021, the Standards for Technological and Engineering Literacy. My opinion is that's what we should all be ascribing to and aspiring to. So I hope my sermon hasn't, I just wanted to create some thought and contemplation. as we go forward. Okay. Any questions, comments? All right, I'm staying between you and lunch, so sorry.
No,
No, it's round
round
table.
table.
Oh, round tables, okay.